Hi, I'm Nicola.
And I'm Jay Percy.
And welcome to the Afro Animist podcast.
We are two animists and spiritual practitioners exploring the secular through the spiritual, discussing life experiences through a sacred lens.
Each week we share our experiences and dive deep into everything in life, from philosophy, metaphysics, obeah, occultism, shamanism, culture, healing, nature, animism,
the arts, pop culture, conspiracies, psychedelics and witchcraft. Nothing is off the table in these discussions, which aim to get to the heart of what it means to be spiritual and Afro-diasporic in an increasingly sterile and authoritarian world.
We keep it real whilst exploring the biggest mysteries of our multiverse. Join us holding this space to laugh, cry, debate, build community and tear down oppressive structures.
Welcome, 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 beautiful, beautiful being of the multiverse to the Afro Animist podcast. You are here with me today, Jay Percy.
And me, Nicola Roth. And today we have another amazing guest for you. Gosh, I'm not going to get you go, Jay. You explain who we're interviewing today.
We have the absolutely fabulous Richard Metzger today. And we come to you today with another impressive bio. I'm just feeling so very happy that we're having such interesting conversations. Interesting. There's a shot for you. So Richard Metzger is the editor and publisher of the long-running outsider arts blog Dangerous Minds. Prior to that, he co-founded the Disinformation Company Limited, a TV production company, theatrical documentary distributor, and multimedia publisher of books and DVDs. He was the creator and host of Channel 4's legendarily weird late-night TV series Disinformation, and the best-selling anthology Disinformation's Book of Lies. You've been really busy. You've been very, very busy, Richard.
I have been. It's true.
It just rings to how passionate you are about this space. So we're really delighted that we get to talk to you today, to talk about your passion with all of this. So thank you so much for being here.
Oh, sure thing. I'm happy to be here.
Right. I am I'm so excited to talk to you properly and pick your brains. And it's purely just because of some things that I've heard you say. So okay. You are probably the first person I've ever met who self-identifies as a warlock and just knew that's who they were from a child, it sounds like. So I want to ask you about this. So we call ourselves witches, and we do that not because necessarily we feel like, okay, yeah, we're witches, that's what we are. It's because that is the closest term to kind of describe our belief system and our practices. So would you talk, sorry, I'm jumping right in here, aren't I? But would you explain to me a bit about what a warlock is and why you identify in that way?
Well, I just think it's a male term for witch, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
No, so I mean, I wouldn't. That's all it is to me. I mean, okay. I think I probably called myself that because of watching the Bewitched TV show when I was a kid.
Of course, yeah.
I thought it was just I was raised in a rural area of West Virginia, which is if you know what that is, where that is, that's a pretty it's a kind of hillbilly area. It's Appalachians, right?
Cows and sheep and not much more.
Well, coal mining and strip mining and stuff like that. Yeah. And then a lot of no jobs whatsoever as well, because it's a very, very poor state. And there's not many coal mining jobs now anyways, because they don't need miners. They just use these huge machines just to cut down entire mountains.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I was living there and somewhat confused when I was a kid by the church that my parents went to and the beliefs that they had. It didn't seem very intelligent to me. And it was like a country church, and I was starting to read mythology and stuff like that. And that it seemed equally valid. Why is Thor and Asgard not the same as somebody else's belief system? Because they both seemed somewhat, I don't know, not that plausible to me.
Yes, fair.
They're both equally as plausible and implausible.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
why is one culturally seen as better than the other? That is a very valid question.
It was just confusing to me as a child.
I think it was
You know,
confusing to a lot of us and a lot of the people listening today.
right. I mean, like in my town, like the synagogue was like this really beautiful modern building, and it stood out amongst, you know, the older buildings in that town. And that was another thing that was confusing. It was like that religion seemed to be somewhat superior on the totem pole, at least locally, because they had a much bigger and better and more modern place of worship. Again, it was all just confusing to me.
Mhm. So you were brought up as obviously Christian.
Yeah, by very conservative parents. Yeah.
Okay. So how did you discover this interest in the occult? Obviously, I know Bewitched, obviously, was big for that.
Yeah.
But especially there, you know, in the middle of West Virginia, little town, how
Yeah.
did you find it?
Well, I mean, remember, we're talking about. I mean, I was born in 1965, so by like 1971 or 72, you know, around that time. So when I'm like 7, the legendary Man, Myth, and Magic encyclopedia set came out, right? And that, do you know what that is?
No, I don't.
Okay, it's because you're too young. That's why you don't know. But it's this. If you go and look it up, you'll see it. It's been reprinted, but it's literally an entire set of it's a 24 set volume set of encyclopedias. It's entirely devoted to the occult, right?
Okay.
And the very first cover has a demon painting by Austin Osman Spare. So that's where I first became aware of him, right? But here's the thing, right? That kind of thing was so available, even in the podunk town that I was raised in, right? That you could find that kind of stuff at the grocery store. Oh yeah, oh yeah. Not just at the grocery store, but like at the pharmacy. So like, it'd be like buying, if you went to like Boots to buy an occult book,
That's
right?
crazy.
Yeah, it is. It is.
But
But it gets even better, right? So it was like, I remember vividly when I saw it for the first time, because it was an absolutely massive display, and it was at the end of the cereal aisle. So where you would normally have had an end cap with, you know, Count Chocula and Cheerios and all this other kind of stuff, there was this massive painting, you know, that was a big poster of Austin Spare's Demon, and then stacks and stacks and stacks of these books. It was a huge thing. And I remember it was like, it dwarfed me. I was just looking at it when I was like 5. And I convinced my mother to buy me the first one, because you had to, you know, every 2 weeks a new one would come out.
Okay.
And I think she thought it was something about, like, you know, like monster movies.
Okay.
Okay.
And so no, not a clue. So my very innocent mother, you know, purchased that stuff for me.
Yeah. Oh dear. How did the rest of your like town respond to this? Because like hear these sort of stories of like Dungeons and Dragons back in the day being treated as some kind of like entryway into the occult. So how did your town feel about these, you know, things at the end of their cereal aisles?
You know what, it was, you know, the Dungeons and Dragons stuff comes a bit later, so that's kind of after my time as a child. But in the 70s, you know, that was the thing. I mean, there were Americans women's magazines. There's one in particular called McCall's. It's no longer published, but it was the kind of thing that you bought at the supermarket. It was right at the counter, you know, and they would have an entire issue that would be devoted to the occult, and it would have like an article on like Anton LaVey and stuff like that. And even their like fashioned out, you know, their fashion layouts were done in like some kind of occult manner, you know. So like I say, it was just completely what was around then, you know. It wasn't extraordinary in that way. I know it sounds weird and it seems weird now, but that kind of thing was just accepted.
Now I kind of feel like you could pick up a copy of Teen Vogue and they would definitely be talking about the occult. Maybe not Vogue, but like Teen Vogue.
No, I definitely have like a Teen Cosmo or Teen Vogue where I used to cut spells out and things like that. They'd release like a spell every week. But yeah, it's just interesting. I remember, you know, going on massive hunts to find my witchy books when I was like 13, 14, like going to special bookstores, calling up ahead and being like, I'm sorry, hi, do you have this very weird book? Please save it for me, you know, and having to do this journey to find it. So that's actually it's super interesting to hear, because I think, you know, it's just really interesting to think about how this magic and these ideas have been in our society, how they've changed, when they've been okay, when they've not been okay, when they've been fashionable. You know, like obviously right now there's a massive movement into the occult becoming like a fashionable thing that's happening online and everything.
I'm just thinking about that time as well, though. You're sort of coming off of the whole psychedelics were being used within the psychotherapeutic industry, and then, you know, that was shut down at that sort of period of time. So I don't know, you would have had a lot of people having exposure to that at that point in time. Am I right in saying that?
Exactly. Well, there was the New Age movement that came out of that, you know, so hippie led to a lot of stuff, and mostly it was in California. But to get back to my hometown, right, you could find those kind of books that you're talking about that are, you know, were maybe in the 90s were difficult to get, or, you know, that they would be on the bookshelves of the local high schools. So I read Magic in Theory and Practice by Aleister Crowley because I checked it out of my school library. And that same school library had the sacred magic of Abramelin the Mage. You know, so
your school was popping up. Oh my gosh.
I feel like we missed something in the 90s, noughties, just kind of like disappeared from the psyche, and now it's like found its way back again.
I think it was arguably more mainstream then than it is now, but it's bigger now because there's just more people. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, I think the percentage of people who were okay with it back then was different now, but there are more numbers of people. I would say a smaller percentage perhaps, but a larger number of people.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So after you know, tricked your mum into buying you this devil book, then what did you what was after that? Because I was reading in your book this information about the, oh gosh, what was it? I'm brain blank. Oh, I've literally just had a brain blank. See, Richard, I don't know.
It's the story earlier where you're talking about
Well, if you're laughing, you can tell me what you're laughing about.
It's the first thing you wanked to.
No, he's spoken about that. That's the book. I love that quote, by the way.
Yeah, what's true. So
after you got this book, what did your practice look like? Because in the book that I've read from you, you were talking about there being lots of faff, basically I call it faff, props, but how do you actually get to the thing where you actually learn how to create change and actual actionable magic? So kind of what was your process like after getting your first kind of book?
Well, it wasn't like I just went out and just started doing magic as a 12-year-old or something like that. But I was kind of self-identifying in that way. So I would say that at that age, I was more in like an information gathering stage of it, trying to figure out what it was. And I was massively into Crowley. I was really into Timothy Leary books. And one of the things that was the most influential on me, and I talk about this in that introduction to that book that you read, or in the other book, I can't remember which it is, but when I would have been about 15 or so, it was before I could drive, right? Some of my punk rock friends and I went to the nearest big city, which is in this case was Pittsburgh, where you could see punk rock concerts. And we went to see the band X play that day. We actually didn't get in because I was too young. All of us were too young to get in, because the drinking age was like 21 back then. Sorry, it was 19. Whatever, 18, and none of us were 18, so they wouldn't let us in. But anyways, I was on acid. I was tripping, which is something that I think I did a lot. I think that had a lot to do with my aptitude for magic, perhaps, as I had a real interest in psychedelic drugs, shall we say. And but I was tripping my brains out, and we went to this record store, and I'm flipping through this stuff, and they had this box of what was obviously the weirdest stuff they had in the store. And things are pretty weird in the early 80s, and so I'm flipping through this box, and it's like Virgin Prunes albums and Cabaret Voltaire albums, and just the most far out stuff of the time. And there was a book called Research and it was a periodical, but it was in a book form, and it had William Burroughs on the cover, and I was well into William Burroughs at that point. And so I was looking through it, and there was this statement that was made by Genesis Peorage of then of Psychic TV and formerly of Throbbing Gristle, and it completely like blew my mind, which was already, you know, kind of primed to be blown anyways because I dropped a tab of acid. And but what it said was that, you know, that someone uses that a modern magician should use the tools of the time, and indicating that, you know, perhaps Eye of Newt, or, you know, burying a potato in the under the moon, full moon, or something like that, is maybe not as efficient as, you know, using a computer or the internet or a fax machine or a video camera. So those are the kind of tools. I mean, I was never interested in wands or robes or any of that stuff. It didn't seem like it seemed like it was somebody else's thing, not my thing. Yeah. And so I was always more interested in what I would say is more like a technological form of magic. Not entirely, but that was a way that I still do see it that way. I mean, I think you could have a magic business.
Yes.
You know, I mean, if you have you could have a business selling occult items in that way. But I had like the business that I had in the earlier part of this century was, you know, we published like magic books. There was a explicitly magic bent to a lot of the things that we did, especially the things that I did. And so I've always saw it as like having a magic business, you know.
I do love this concept of having a magic business.
Yeah.
How do you inject magic into your business? How do you make it magical for you?
Well, we're talking about a publishing company and a video, DVD, and theatrical distribution company, right? Yes. So in the way that my mind works, right? Like one of the things that was put out by that company was an anti-Walmart documentary called Walmart, The High Cost of Low Price, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't like the Walmart Corporation, and I think they're evil. And so I was happy to put that out into the world, right? And there was another one that we put out called Outfoxed, right? And it was really the first documentary where people were saying, like, look, Fox News is anything but fair, fair and unbiased. It's exactly the opposite. And so to put those kind of things out into the culture, for me, I mean, you know what I mean? It's like it's different from an act of sex magic, as you see what I'm saying, but it's still creating a sort of perturbance in the system.
Yes.
And in this case, it was a big one, you know, and that film, the Outfox film, that was discussed on cable news channels in America for a good 2 weeks.
Wow.
2 weeks.
Yeah,
well, it was, I think it must have been a slow news week too, but it was true. It was debated everywhere but Fox.
Yeah,
you know?
Of course.
So what you're doing is you're talking about this idea of injecting into the public, the social psyche. That is an act of magic. That's why we do rituals, right? To get to the heart of that. So what could possibly be more ritualistic than having media that does the exact thing that you're trying to do in a ritual?
It's very targeted.
Yes.
It's very targeted. You know, in this case, it was against an entire corporation, you know, a mega corporation.
And no one came after you. You're still alive.
No, as far as I know, yes.
You haven't been replaced. I think it's such an interesting way to think about it, because, you know, we speak a lot on this podcast. Like I said earlier, you know, we may say we're witches, but it isn't necessarily that, like, those words specifically make sense for what it is exactly that we do in the greater kind of thing. And I think to think about magic in a different, you know, potentially for other people to think about magic in that way of it actually just creating transformation, you know, creating effect, like, and there's so many ways that you can actually do that. It doesn't have to be sitting at home lighting a candle, like doing your spell. What in that way, that's one way to do it. But actually what you've done is you've created a whole business and lifestyle around creating this change in the wider community, which I think is actually, like, so brilliant.
And also to make money so I could support myself. So, you know, and it made money so to support newer projects as well. So it was like that. So, you know, it was a churning wheel of, you know, of putting stuff out and money comes in, put more stuff out, money, you know, that kind of thing was, you know, that's like I say, magic business. It's just the way that I look at it. Yeah.
I think it's really poignant that you brought up money and this idea of, well, this concept of money having this energy to create new projects. And it is important in the 21st century. And it sounds like you've got quite a healthy magical relationship with money, being able to generate it to do more of what you want to do and put out what you want to put out into the world.
Well, I wish I had a better relationship with money. Let's just say that it goes up and down a bit, you know. So.
We all do, babes. We all do. There's got a very specific energy, the coming and going, the money of the world. I wanted to ask you, like, so obviously we're talking about the way that you do your spell work is a little bit maybe different when it comes to your business. Do you have like practices that you do at home that would be more kind of maybe recognizable for people as like magical or spiritual practices, or is that not the way you kind of look at this?
No, I do,
Yeah.
but okay. In one way, I look at magic as being kind of like a martial art. It's like a mental martial art, right? And you have to internalize it after a certain point. I mean, you know, you meet certain people who have like very magical personalities, you know, and it's because they've integrated that into themselves. And it was, I think also, if you look at someone like Aleister Crowley, there was a point where he just stopped doing it because he was it, right? And I'm not saying that's me, but I'm just saying that that's kind of the way that I look at it in that way. So recognizable to somebody else, maybe.
I love that little reminder though of the Aleister Crowley just stopping because he was it, being it. We've had this conversation, Nikki and I, time and time again, of like, you know what, I'm not feeling in a place where I'm doing rituals at the moment. However, I am feeling the very essence of the thing. I feel like I am aligned or attuned to be attracting that with or without the candles. That's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, I've gone around the houses with all of that because I'm such a, you know, a perfectionist. I like things to be right and in line, and you know, so in my mind I need to follow tradition, what's been done, like how does this work, and that took me on such a specific journey of just never feeling like I was in the right place, doing the right thing, having the right thing. And in the past, I don't know, maybe 5 years of my journey, I've let go of so much stuff, and it's made my practice much more integratable into my life. Like it feels like this is now what I live. So I don't like get up and light candles and chant. Maybe I'll do that, depends on how I feel, but most of the time my practice or my place where I feel like I'm connecting and I'm getting to that zone will be just because I'm going out for a walk. I'm, you know, it's not necessarily something specific or sitting down and creating spells in that way anymore. And again, I think that's a really important thing. Like when it comes to like spiritual work and magical practices and stuff, I feel like there can be this attitude of like, you're always learning, you're always trying to be better, you're always trying to grow and evolve and heal, and you know, all of these magic buzzwords that we have around it. And that journey will never end, like if that's how you think about it, you know. And sometimes I feel like there's this aspect, so like for me, magic is just, we're all magic. We have that, we it's a place of connection and understanding like the energies, unseen energies in the universe. So therefore it doesn't have to look like anything crazy or different or big. It can literally simply be just getting up and doing a thing or thinking about a thing with intention.
Well, I mean, that's one of the things that I learned from this working on this documentary series, how I met the two of you, right? It's that in talking to, we did 49 interviews for it, right? And so there was no one person who like an audience of an uninitiated audience would look at it and say, that person's crazy. There's not one person that everybody would say like, oh, you know, I think the reaction would be, oh, these people know something maybe that I don't know. Or, you know, I mean, that's an open-minded reaction to it. The closed-minded reaction to it is pretty obvious what that would be.
Yes.
But yeah.
100%.
So tell us a bit more, tell our audience a bit more of this documentary you're working on. We're keen to hear it.
Right. Well, as you know, because you were in it, I'm working on a documentary. It's a currently a four-part, maybe expanded series that's being independently produced, called The Magic Show, or just Magic Show. We haven't really decided. Probably Magic Show is what the title's going to be. And we started in Los Angeles in late September, then went to New York, and then went to London for 2 weeks. And that all wrapped up about 2.5 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. And it was a fascinating experience. It was a real great adventure to have. And I got to meet a lot of really interesting and fascinating people. But the thing, like I say, that one of the things that came out of it, the commonality is that no one really had sort of an outlandish practice or something that seemed kind of like, what's this one going on about? There was none of that. Everybody was like super intelligent, and their practices were, they were, I wouldn't say mundane, but they were not extraordinary in that way, And so, and I think that should be of interest to the audience, because they don't know what this is all about. I mean, like, for instance, if you're talking about chaos magic or something like that, chaos magic is widely understood by people who are into the Marvel universe films to be something that's kind of Lovecraftian.
Yes.
Yeah. But and that term is used a lot, but I don't think people, the man on the street or the person who's there, or the person sitting in a movie theater watching that kind of thing, they don't realize that this is like a real thing. But it's sort of different. It's not going to be fireballs coming out of your hands or something like that, but it's actually a real thing. And I think that's where, I mean, I have a really, really great feeling about this documentary series. I really think that people are going to be really massively into it, and it will be a kind of a cult sensation.
We really hope so too. What spurred you? What spurred you on to making this documentary? What inspired you to go forth with it?
You know what? I don't remember. A friend of mine suggested it, and suddenly it just like I just saw the whole thing, and I was like, okay, this is what I would do.
Do you know your human design type?
No.
Okay.
No, I've not heard of that.
It's this new fad we're all getting into and trying to figure out. We love it.
It's interesting what you said. A friend suggested it to you, and you decided to go with it. There's a specific type of human who will get a suggestion and then run with it, and if they've received that and responded to it from their sacral center, then they'll be able to go forth with success in this thing. So that was why the pause.
We just need your time of birth, place of birth. Oh no, we know place of birth, and then we're gonna know everything about you.
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna do all your charts.
We'll do your charts. We'll put you in the dossier.
I had somebody do a chart for me once, for a horoscope thing, and it was a guy who was a famous artist who, I would say somebody who's interested in listening to this interview with me is going to know who this guy is. Paul Laffoley was his name, right? And he had art shows all over the world, but he was an artist who, he was a senior citizen before he was sort of discovered by the art world, as it were. And so he had a full body of work that had never been seen before. It was just completely blew people's minds. And he was like, some combination of like Merlin and like a mild-mannered, architect, with that kind of mind, with semi-autistic and able to do things for a long period of time and concentrate. Well, anyways, he did one for me, and we were good friends, and he called me up one day and said, oh, happy birthday, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, hey, do you want me to do a horoscope for you? I'm like, yeah, of course. And so a couple of days later, this horoscope arrived, done in his very distinctive artistic way he does things, and by hand, right? And all of the energy was in like the as it were the top quadrant of on the left side. So it was like all of the energy was in Scorpio, right? And so he said, so he calls me up and he says, you have to picture this guy. He's like it would have been at the time in his 70s, bald, and he stutters, and he's a great genius, right? But he takes everything really, really seriously, I think. And he called up and we were talking about it, and he said, well, you know that you're like a quintuple Scorpio. And I said, oh, really? Because it's not really something that I look into. I said, really? And he was like, yeah. He was like, he goes, Richard, I got to ask you something. He's like, are you like really sexually promiscuous? And I said, no, not at all. And he said, well, you've got the horoscope of a femme fatale.
You missed your calling.
Yeah, you
I
missed
think
your
so.
calling.
Perhaps, yes.
You spent it all on that witch in the book.
Yes.
Oh my god, that's so interesting. I would love to meet this guy. Well, you showed us this horoscope, this hand-drawn horoscope, like a few months ago when we spoke to you, and it was so
Oh, that's right. I did.
Yeah.
We did the Zoom call. Yes, that's true.
Yeah. It was amazing. It blew our minds. So Scorpio, quadruple Scorpio, did you say?
That's what he said, yeah.
I wonder what that's in then. So it must be
it's probably like his sun rising,
moon.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
maybe
it was that kind of thing,
Mercury.
yeah.
That's so interesting. And you're not promiscuous.
Mm-mm.
Are you promising? Because we don't believe you.
I've been happily married for almost 20 years. So
that is wonderful. Maybe you didn't miss your calling then. Maybe you've just taken that energy and redirected it in a way that's visually seductive to the rest of the world, something like that.
This is a really good point, actually. Like if we're thinking about the energy of Scorpio and kind of what that brings, I feel like media is a really interesting place for that energy to come out, and actually what you create and the kind of change that you try to create is like
media is already seen as quite occulted from the common person. There's always lots of theories around what Hollywood is and all these rituals and all of that. And then the fact that you're taking this already quite occulted art form and then specifically going for the occult with it, that's probably where it's showing for you.
100%.
It's a great way to redirect that energy.
I feel like media is quite promiscuous, isn't it? It's like inviting people in, like, hey, look at this thing, look at this, come and see my inner world. So maybe that's how it works for you. But you can make anything make sense when it comes to astrology. Okay. So have you had a little bit in your book, you spoke about wanting to find like the actionable things, and things that I said essentially kind of prove that magic is real, I guess. Like, have you had any experiences that have kind of just proved to you that this stuff is real?
Oh yeah. Oh God, yeah. I mean, one of the people I interviewed, the author Gary Lackman, he would not consider himself a practicing magician at all. He's an academic who looks at this stuff and writes very compelling books, sort of macro look at these kind of things. And he said that he looked at magic as a synchronicity generator, right? As a synchronicity generator, and that you would notice your success by how many synchronicities that you would see. And they wouldn't be things that were like mundane, like, oh, I was just thinking about a ladder and there's a ladder, or something like this. It had to be something like, like really extraordinary. And so that's kind of where I look for success in that way. But to answer your question about where you find things that are real, like I explained to you before that it's like a business or technology kind of magic as far as I look at it, but I also look at it from a different way as well. And that is, like I say, I've been very interested in psychedelic drugs from a young age. And I was really into Terence McKenna as well. And so I would take like 5 grams of mushrooms, the so-called heroic dose, and go into a dark room. And I would start, you start to communicate with a voice that is not yours. And then I was also, there was a point in my life when I was in my late 20s where nothing was going well for me. And I was very confused about my place in the world, or how I fit in, or how I would, the things, how would I make my talents into something that I could make money from, basically, to survive. And things were not going that well. And I remember at the time thinking, like, I got to do something that's just going to blow the bad shit out of my brain. It was like, literally, it was a kind of magic where it was like, I see like a log jam, and it needs to go. It needs to be I didn't care. I needed to create chaos in my life to shake it up, right? And so so at that point I thought, oh, I'm going to get some DMT, right? And so I had like grams of DMT and I would smoke it like a lot. And
on your own?
Yeah. I've only ever done it. I think I've only ever done it with another person in the room one time. And that was the first time that I did it. But yeah, it's a scary thing. I don't know if you've ever done it. It's like kind of like you're contemplating a bungee jump with like basically a crack pipe in your hand. Like, do I really want to do this? Because it seems frightening. And
I've never ayahuasca, yeah, but not just DMT.
Well, they're so similar. I mean, the DMT is just a bit more intense and it's really short acting. So it lasts like 90 seconds.
Yeah, but I feel like I need the 8-hour journey to basically come back around to understand that level of information. Sorry, continue.
But if you take an ayahuasca, you know what I'm talking about, where you get this voice, you can get to this communication. And I mean, this is going to sound weird to a lot of people, but there was a point where, and I don't know if this was because I was doing too many drugs and imagining this, but I don't think it was, and I'll tell you why. But I started to have a lot of like really oddball coincidences, and I'll give you like a couple of examples right now. One of them was at the time I was trying to start a record label, right? It was the idea was to put out like easy listening stuff and like movie soundtracks and like spy movie soundtracks and old synthesizer stuff, you know, that kind of like queasy listening, easy listening kind of stuff. And there was a track that I needed to license from a company in Rome, right? And so I went over to my friend Terry's office and I typed up this thing and I faxed it to Rome, right? That very evening, the person who I faxed came to the hotel where I was working in Manhattan, right? And handed me her credit card. I mean, that's fairly inexplicable. You have to think
that's crazy.
What?
Yeah. But I mean, it's so direct. Yeah. It's so direct. I mean, think of what are the chances of that happening? Well, if you think about how many people there are in the world, theoretically, you know, you're getting into the billions already. And then if you sort of say like, well, okay, well, let's look at the people who are traveling, who are in, you know, it's still a large pool of people for that person to come in and hand me her credit card.
Yeah, that's not purely coincidence. That's synchronistic.
Yeah, that's the kind of synchronicity that like Gary was talking about. Things where you just can't possibly ignore that or think like that. There's no significance to that. That just happens all the time, you know. But I'll tell you another story, and you tell me if what you think about this one when I get to the end of it, right? So one day this was in the mid 80s, maybe like 87, something like that. I'm in the front room of the apartment that I lived in the East Village, and I'm cleaning out my bookshelves. So there's like stacks of books beside me and magazines and stuff like that. And my girlfriend came into the room and she pointed to a photograph. There was an 8x10 glossy of the woman I had lived with before her. And she said, "Who is that?" And I said, and I said, she's like, "I know her." And I'm like, "I don't think it's possible that you would know her because she'd lived in London." I said, "While you were living in London, she was British. She was living here with me. And I don't see how your paths would have crossed." I just, you know, 2 minutes later, she comes in with her address book and reads me the address of this woman, right? Who would have been my previous girlfriend, right? Now, here's the story. So she was literally staying in the bed of the woman who was in my bed in New York. Okay, we broke up and she hated my guts and she left for England, right? But while she was there, she'd said to her friend from college, "I'll let you sublease this amazing house that I have, but you have to keep my room and no one can sleep in my room, period," right? And so this future girlfriend of mine who was living in London, her good friend was dating that guy. So that's why they were staying in the house, right? So she was actually literally sleeping. So think about this. So a woman goes from my apartment, my bed, back to her bed in London, and the next woman that I would be with was in her bed.
That's crazy.
That's a good one. That's a good one,
That
right?
is a really good one.
But
That's some Scorpio shit, yo.
But it gets a little bit better, right? So a few months after this, her mother had come to visit us in New York, and her mother was like a groupie in the 60s. So she had, met up with people like Warren Beatty and Jimi Hendrix and Brian Jones and this kind of thing. And so we're walking down the street in East Village, and she says, "Oh, this is the building I used to live in." And I said, "Really? I used to live in that building too. What apartment did you live in?" And she said, 4F. And I said, "That's the apartment. So what are the chances that I'm going to be dating the daughter of a woman who we lived in the same apartment?"
So slim.
I mean, yeah. So, and the thing is, but the important thing I think to point out about all of this, to anybody listening, is there was no significance to this. Ultimately, it wasn't like I thought, "Oh, I'm on the path, or she must be the one for me," because we didn't really last that much longer, probably more a year or two, 3 years tops. So it wasn't like it was even like this significant relationship for me that you would think that kind of thing would be like, "Oh, this must be your soulmate or something." It was nothing like that. It was just that those extremely noticeable, unmissable coincidences happened.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, you start to see things like that when you're doing things right.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah,
I think what you're saying there, it's not necessarily pointing towards it being a soulmate, but definitely that you're going through your journey as you're supposed to right now. That's what that synchronicity.
Yeah, like a signpost that's saying,
Yeah.
like, you're still on the right road, buddy.
Yeah.
Just keep going.
Keep going. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
those stories do really resonate.
I mean,
love a good
and
synchronicity story.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the weird thing, is like there were other people involved. It's not like, I have to tell you, it just happened to me. And no, there were other people involved. There were human props in all of this. And if you run the film backwards, it starts in like 1968 when her mother is living in that apartment.
Yeah.
That's a bomb with a long fuse.
Yeah.
Really is. Isn't that a way to describe life, though?
Yeah.
I love it though, because these are the things that, sorry, my doggy's in the background. These are the things that I just think for me make magic all the more real. Like you're constantly receiving messages, and if you pay attention, then they're there, like that, like those levels of synchronicity.
Mm-hmm. You can't deny that when something like that happens. It's undeniable. It's like someone is basically sort of tapping you on the shoulder and saying, "Look at this.
Pay attention."
Yeah.
Lovely.
We've had a few of those, haven't we, Jay?
Oh, totally.
But we are soulmates.
We are literally, we complete each other.
So Richard, what we're talking about now is we just had our charts done together, and the woman who did our charts, this thing called Human Design, checked her a couple of weeks ago, guys, and you can hear the episode. She literally is like, if you put your charts together, you make a whole person. So like with Human Design, it's based on astrology, I Ching, the chakra system, all of this stuff kind of jumbled together, and it kind of tells you what your energetic system looks like. And then she's done both of our charts and put them together, and it literally, all of the systems connect up. It's like she's got what I need, I've got what she needs.
Yeah.
It's so good. Not one single man that I've ever dated, it's been like that. But I've managed to find it in Jay. I love it.
Congrats.
Thanks, babe. You can come to the wedding. So just before we wrap up, I really wanted to talk to you about, or just to have a little bit of information about your website, dangerousminds.net. So what is that about? Why would people go there?
It's an outsider arts blog, basically. It's been around since 2009. And for a long time, we were affiliated with Vice Media. That ended a couple of years ago with the COVID thing, sadly. But it's an outsider arts blog, and it's not, I mean, it for a while it made a lot of money and it was really popular. That's less true these days because of the way that Facebook had changed their algorithm. At one point, we've probably had 12 to 14 million visitors a month, which is, box office buffo. And so, but now it's, we'd be really lucky if we had 3 million a month, and that's hard to build a business on. So it's kind of, at this point, I would say it's not like it's not dead, but it's not something that it's not my main focus, obviously, because I just can't make any money with it. But so it was something that churned out like 5 articles a day. There were other people doing it.
Wow.
And now it's just, whenever I feel like doing something new, or one of the other contributors indeed feels like writing something, it's like, oh, I want to get a free copy of that, box set vinyl, and you review it or something like that. So that's kind of where it's at with that at this point. But it's an outsider arts blog, and it was looking at like weird movies, punk rock, things that were unusual and weird, sort of like underground culture, such that it exists today, which it really doesn't, but just weird things or funny things.
Okay, so have a trawl through that, guys. We need to bring this back up to 14 million. We've got 100 listeners for you. So
Okay,
they'll
great.
all go over there and, put a little dent in it. Is there anything, obviously, apart from Magic Show, like, is there anything you're working on right now that you'd like to let our listeners
Well, I'm going to be working on the Magic Show like around the clock for the next few months. It's like there's 53 hours of interviews that we did with 49 people, and so I'm just I'm listening to that now and trying to hear the connections where somebody says one thing and then somebody else sort of finishes that thought for them. It's just how that works together. And the way that I do that is I put these things on the computer, I turn the speakers up really loud, and I basically pace around my house and listen to it. I just pace around the house and listen to it. And I do it over and over and over again until I'm very familiar with what they are. And then I take a cut down and just think, okay, here are the things I'm going to use from this hour. And then I cut that down and then sort of, work, fan out from there, but I'm condensing it. And that's the stage of it that I'm at right now. So I'm at the stage where I have not even listened to all of the interviews as of right now. I've listened to most of them, but not all of them. I listened to both of yours, and they were really good. They're great, by the way.
Amazing.
You guys are naturals. You're terrific. It's almost like you do a podcast and you're all sick.
Crazy, isn't it?
But that's where I'm at with it right now. Like I say, it's just like it's going to be months and months and months of me, walking around the house in my pajamas with a joint in my mouth, just trying to figure out what this shit is and how I'm gonna do this once I get to the edit room.
It was 49 interviews, 49 people you said, right?
Yes.
53 hours.
And 53 hours? Oh, that is a lot of work. And, I'm sure you're going to find it very enjoyable. And then by the time you come to the end of Magic Show, it's going to be absolutely phenomenal. I'm super excited to see Magic Show in all of its glory.
Me too.
I'm so jazzed about this.
Yeah, I feel like there's like you said to us actually when you got in touch with us, first of all, Richard, like there's nothing quite like this out there, but there is such a space for it right now.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That's why I think it's going to be. I think it will be quite a sensation in that way. But no one has ever done something like. I mean, I was Amanda Yates Garcia, calls herself the Oracle of Los Angeles. She's a medium and a witch, and she's an author. And the first thing that she said was, God, normally when I do these interviews, the first thing I get asked is, oh, you don't have a wart on your nose. You're not green. Well, and that's the first thing out of the gate, and that's the first thing out of the gate. But I also don't think that there's ever been a TV show like this that has certainly been produced by somebody who's a practicing magician themselves, because it's not, how these things go. It's like they shoot it becomes one of those like History Channel shows. This is not that.
Or like a gag. I remember a few years back, we have this breakfast show called This Morning in the UK, and they had some witches on doing a spell to try and bring about snow for the winter. And the amount of people in like pagan society forums or witch forums were like, this is just a misrepresentation of us. This is why we shouldn't have these people who don't understand what we're doing, displaying. They had a cauldron. They had them dressed up in like Party City costumes. It was absolutely disgusting. I was just like, oh, this is so cringe. So to have someone who actually knows what this was about, until you've just mentioned it now, I didn't even think there could be a possibility that someone would ask, oh, where's your hat? I think I'd have got off, but that was it, and just walked out.
Yeah, I'm finished. Goodbye.
Yeah. Do you know what? We're done here. So thank you. All of the questions were brilliant and insightful, and actually get to the heart of what these practices are about. So I really have so much faith that Magic Show is going to be getting to the core of that. And like you said, a sensation. We want this to be like cult classic. I'm sure it's going to be amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see how it can't be, given what I've got for it. I mean, okay, here's one last thing I'll leave you with, right? Is that the people talk about meta sigils or meta spells or this kind of thing. If you, and it's the way I look at it, is it anything that I would make, or create artistically or creatively, is I look at it as a magic thing. But in this case, it's not just my magic, it's the magic of 48 other people. You know what I mean? It's everybody's charge is going in the same direction on this show. Everybody, it was amazing to me just how everyone was aligned in the same way of thinking. As I was saying before, it's like there was no real disagreement. There was no one who was outlandish or who you look at and say, who is this idiot? There was none of that. You know what I mean? It's that intellectual strength of the cast goes into the spell as a whole, making it more, potent, making it stronger, making it more likely to hit in that way. And the other thing is, with 49 people, you've got a lot of interesting faces as well. So it's very emotionally engaging. Like as Eric, the cameraman, said, he was like, no one would turn this off. If you started watching this, no one would turn this off.
Yeah.
So that's the goal with this show. So.
Oh gosh, I literally cannot wait to see it. I'm so interested to just see all these. Not that Jay and I are part of it even, but just to see these interviews and like just someone that you've managed to have this level of conversation about this with this many people who are practicing. I'm super excited.
Yeah, there's dozens of hours of things that will not make it to the show as well, that can be put online or in a podcast or in any number of things. But like I say, I've got literally dozens of hours beyond what I'll use. That's perfectly great stuff. Really, like prime people saying great stuff,
I
But
think
they were
this is, sorry, I was just gonna say, it's so amazing as an actor, like to come out and have everything be good, and like there be extra stuff is actually just like, whoa. This feels, actually, it does feel very, very, very much in line, and I can totally feel all of those energetic lines that you've pulled in of all of these people, and we will all continue to build that energy for it, because I think everyone that I've spoken to who's been part of it, everyone's been so just excited about the fact that this thing is happening, and there'll be a space of like real representation rather than like this crazy spanky bullshit.
Right. Well, who have you talked to who I also interviewed?
We've spoken to the Folger Press and his wife. Like, we met them. So a few people obviously at the Magickal Women's Conference.
Zoe Howe.
So we didn't get to speak to Zoe. Did you speak to her?
Yeah.
Jay?
She was at the conference too.
Yeah, but we didn't get to meet her, unfortunately.
She's great.
Yeah, it's like you've managed to pull together some really, really interesting people, and I think this is going to be great. So everyone, keep your eyes peeled. Next year, we're going to be letting you know when this is all out, and we expect you all to watch it.
Yes, show your support to your magical sisters and brothers in this community, and I think that is just as good a place as any to bring this magical episode to a close. Richard, tell us, where can we find you? This is a time to plug yourself.
Well, dangerousminds.net.
Yeah.
That's where you can find me.
Wonderful.
But I don't want to be found right now. So I'm off of all social media.
Oh, okay.
And I got kicked off of Twitter, and it was like the best thing that could possibly happen to my mental health.
You got kicked off of, well, we're gonna have to have a separate conversation about that.
I told a Nazi to fuck off, and it wasn't even like I told him to fuck off in that color. I just said, "Hey, go fuck yourself." And for some reason, they kicked me off for that.
You can't be on Twitter and tell a Nazis go fuck themselves. Did you not know this, Richard?
Apparently, I didn't get the memo about that one. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Richard
My pleasure.
Metzger, for being on the Afro Animist podcast today. We've been so delightfully happy to have you here. I'm Jay Percy.
And I'm Nicola Roth. And we will see you all next week. Bye, guys.
Bye. Thank you, beautiful being of the multiverse, for joining us on the Afro Animist podcast.
If you want to get stuck into the conversation or have a question about anything we speak about here, join our mailing list and find us on our socials.
On TikTok and Instagram, find us at the Afro Animist podcast.
On Twitter, you can find us at Afro Animist. If you're listening to us on Spotify or Apple Music, you can also find this talk on YouTube. Just search for us and we will pop up as if by magic.
If you're loving what we're talking about here, share, like, and subscribe. And remember to leave us a thumbs up or 5-star rating on your favourite platform.